Good evening and welcome to the Planning and Zoning meeting of the City of Milford for Tuesday, January 17, 2017. If I can ask you at this time to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sit, Tony.
Sorry. Just trying to think. May we please have roll call from left to right?
Richard Lutz.
John Grant.
Scott Marlowe.
Carl S. Moore.
Tom Nickel.
Tom Panzella.
Jim Quish.
And I am Anthony Sutton, Vice Chairman, sitting tonight as Acting Chairman. We are joined tonight by David Sulkus, City Planner, and Phyllis Leggett, our Board Clerk. Our first item on the agenda this evening is we've received the resignation letter of Chairman Edward Mead. And at this point, I believe the proper procedure would be to ask if we can add to the agenda this evening, at this time, a vote for Chairman to replace Mr. Mead in light of his resignation. I would like to make a motion to add that vote to the agenda this evening. Is there a second? Mr. Panzella. Does anyone wish to be heard on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of adding this to the agenda? The motion passes. In that case, I would like to make a nomination that Scott Marlowe be the new chairman for the Planning and Zoning Commission. Is there a second? Mr. Nickel. Does anyone else wish to make a nomination relative to the chairmanship? Seeing none, we'll close nominations. Does anyone wish to be heard on the nomination of Mr. Marlowe as chairman? Seeing none, we will call the question to a vote. All in favor? All opposed? The motion passes. Mr. Marlowe, congratulations.
Thank you. Okay, well, I'm sure I'll make a few mistakes here and there, but first item on the order of business is public hearing for leftover for 604 Naugatuck Avenue, petition of Maria Torres for special permit and site plan review approval to establish a daycare center on map 18, block 370, parcel 8, of which Kingdom Life Christian Church, 597 Naugatuck Avenue, is the owner. Is there someone here to present for that? If you could state your name and address and the presentation. Thank you.
Hi, Scott. My name is Tom Probert. I'm owner of North Arrow Engineering Graphics. I had a role in designing and expediting the plans for the daycare, and I'm here this evening to help in any way that I can with any questions concerning the previous zoning issue.
Would it be, Mr. Sulkus, would it be appropriate just to review the plan right now to have the presentation again, since it was a while ago?
Yeah, I think the applicant should walk you through the application and explain to you what has changed since initially they applied and what they're proposing as of today.
Mr. Probert, if you could do that.
I believe so. I missed the past couple meetings, so I apologize. So I'm going by a letter here that I believe was requested by Planning and Zoning. Is that me? Oh, okay. And I do apologize, but I'm not fully up to speed onto the previous requirements of the last meeting.
Well, if you could take the plans and just walk the board through what the proposal is. I know there was some questions about as far as the amount of parking required.
Okay.
And I believe there was also a question as far as the drop-off area, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. I believe you might have a letter from Maria Torres in front of you that might look like this. Okay. This is a description of the event concerning drop-off and pickup for the children. And on Site Plan 1 shows the building, the street, and the parking on the building. It shows also additional parking next door that Kingdom Life Christian Church, who owns the property, has volunteered to let the daycare use for additional parking. Okay.
Sure. Is Mr. Solkis, do you have a comment?
Well, I can read to you my report, which you should have all received. The applicant proposes to convert an existing 3,500 square foot building into a child daycare facility. The site provides for only 4 parking spaces where 14 are required. Access to the western end spot is impeded by a retaining wall. The statement of use lists a maximum of 40 students can be accommodated in the daycare. The applicant is proposing to use a parking area at 600 Naugatuck Avenue. The use of the neighboring lot would be allowed by Section 3.17.2.16, subsection 6, provided that the information is provided to make a determination of parking adequacy. A partial site plan has been provided on 600 Naugatuck Avenue, which is listed by the Milford assessor as a 2,000 square foot 2-unit maintenance garage. The property owner of 600 Naugatuck Avenue should confirm information on the uses and hours of operation of the tenants of 600 Naugatuck Avenue. Potential conflicts between the existing commercial uses and proposed daycare use should be examined. If approved, a lease would be needed to be provided for the use of 600 Naugatuck Avenue. A child drop-off and pickup area is not shown on the site plan. The applicant proposes to create an outdoor play area that will be enclosed by a chain link fence, which will have bollards and wheel stops running along the front of the 4 proposed parking spaces. Interdepartmental reports. The city engineer has required further information be provided. See the attached report. The fire department is requiring that a sprinkler system be installed. See the attached report. The health department requires an inspection and license prior to the use opening for business. The police department approved the application without any comment.
Thank you, Mr. Solkis. Mr. Provert, do you want to respond to any of that? There were some questions there about the parking and such.
No, other than just the plan here indicating the extra parking spots by 600 that we have. There was also parking offered from across the street, which isn't used, but like David had indicated to me earlier, is already allotted for that building. So we're kind of between a rock and a hard space there.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions from the board for either Mr. Solkis or Mr. Probert?
Yes, I have some.
Yes, Mr. Lutz.
Mr. Solkis, have we received any kind of lease or anything showing that the parking is from the Kingdom Life Church has been granted?
We have not received a lease, which is required by our regulations.
Okay. Is the applicant agreeing to put in the sprinkler system?
The sprinkler system is in the building.
Is what?
There is a sprinkler system in the building.
There is.
Mm-hmm.
Was it installed prior to the inspection by the fire department?
It was installed approximately 30 to 60 days ago.
Oh, okay. So you did the sprinkler system for because they asked for it. Okay. I didn't understand, Mr. Solkis, your comment, the conflict between the existing commercial uses. Could you explain that to us?
Sure. When the regulations allow parking off-site, one of the things you need to do is determine whether or not there's a conflict between the proposed use by the applicant and the users of the site currently. So you have to make that determination to see whether or not there's a conflict.
I believe in a previous meeting, we also asked if there could be some kind of a document, letter, lease, something, saying that you could use this parking space, and we haven't received it.
I'm sorry, I did receive the,
Excuse me, if you could, excuse me, if you could just state your name, please. Thank you.
Maria Torres. Oh, God. Hang on a second. Okay. I did receive the lease. I just didn't print it out, but I have it on my phone from the owner of Kingdom Life.
Okay, thank you. Would that be something, Mr. Solkis, that would have to be printed out and distributed?
Not necessarily. I mean, as a condition of approval, they would just have to provide it. And it would be good for the board to know what the terms of the lease are, though. The expectation of the board on applications like this in the past is that it's a long-term lease, not something that expires, in 6 months or a year.
Okay, thank you. Is there other questions from the board? Yes, Mr. Quish.
So in addition to the lease that could be conditional in an approval, we have we need a statement from the tenant, existing tenant, if there is a tenant in 600, and find out what their use, and if that's now impaired because the use of the daycare center. So whether that's a potential conflict or not has to be determined through some kind of a document, that just a narrative that says the existing tenant, if there is one, doesn't have a vehicle, and so all these spaces are available, or he's going to use 3 of them at a certain time of day, or whatever. We need to understand that.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. There is no tenant at the moment.
But there's a building there. So now, to question to David, if somebody wanted to rent that place and have a business, he would actually maybe have no parking.
Potentially, that would be correct.
I think the owner of the building should be made aware of that so that they know that that building now is not rentable because you've rented the parking spaces. And that should be addressed in writing from the owner.
Okay?
Is there other questions from the board?
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for Maria, because I thought in one of her earlier submissions, she had outlined a particular use for that building.
I think they only go there twice a week, Mondays from 3 to 6 and Saturdays, and we're not open Saturdays.
Other questions? I have a question. I just wonder if you could just walk me through how the drop-off really is going to happen. I saw in your letter, I saw the timing changed as well from, it was 7:30, I think, in one letter, and now it's 6:30?
Yeah, because we have early drop-offs for 4 children, so there's going to be a teacher there.
I'm sorry, where would they drop them?
In the back.
When you say in the back, I know there's the parking spaces back there.
Yeah, the 4 parking spaces in the back.
So someone would pull in, drop the person off, but can they do that if those spaces are occupied?
Well, what we're going to do, we're going to have one of the teachers go out and retrieve the children and bring them inside. The parents don't even have to go inside.
No, I was more wondering if you physically have the space, if there's people parking, whoever that may be, in those 4 spaces, and someone comes to drop off their child, will they be able to pull into that spot, turn around, and pull back out?
Yes, yes.
Yes, I would make a suggestion of putting cones there or some type of signage temporary signage or indication for drop-off at that time, just at specific times.
thank you. Thank both of you. So I guess if there's no other questions, we'll move on to public comment on this. So what I would ask at this time is that if there is anyone in favor of this, of the daycare facility, if they could come forward, give your name, address, and just address the board. All questions would come to the board. So thank you both. So again, anyone in favor? Seeing none, is there anyone against the daycare facility going in? If, again, if you could come forward. Seeing none, close the hearing. We'll close the public comment of the hearing. At this time, if I'd ask if there's a motion from the board on this matter. Mr. Lutz.
I motion, excuse me, I motion that we approve this application under the condition that the applicants supply an acceptable lease, okay, for the parking spaces, and I guess that's it, and an acceptable lease.
Okay. Is there a second? Mr. Quish.
I think we need to put in that there's an acceptable narrative for the use of the 600 included with the lease that shows that there's no conflict, and then there's several outstanding issues from engineering. So you know, I would say that if those issues are satisfactorily addressed, the lease is produced with a narrative regarding the present use and non-conflict with times and space requirements for both businesses to operate, you know, and some kind of acknowledgement from the owner that his potential to lease that to someone else that needs those parking spaces, they are now owned by, for those times anyway, owned by this new venture.
Mr. Lutz, would you like to amend your motion?
I accept Mr. Quish's comments as a friendly amendment.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Mr. Quish, all in favor of the motion? Any discussion or comment on the motion from the board?
I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Moore.
Is there any write-up on the conditions that we're proposing? It seems like this is kind of vague in what we're proposing right now to amend Mr. Lutz's motion.
I think that if we could repeat or just maybe clarify, Mr. Lutz, if you could clarify exactly what the motion is.
It's the motion to approve with the understanding that we get an acceptable lease for the spaces as well as a narrative from the owners of 600 stating that they understand that they have leased these spots to the school and that they cannot be used for any other purpose.
Mr. Moore, does that clarify?
And that includes all other departments being signed off on it, correct? Correct. I'm okay.
Any other comments on the motion?
Yeah, and just that we would add that the issues brought up by various city departments are addressed to those specific departments' satisfaction.
Absolutely.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
So I just want to understand, because I've got to draft the letter. You want the property owner to be notified that the parking spaces that are on 600 cannot be used for any other purpose for that property. Is that correct?
Yes, during the hours of the, that the school would use those spaces.
Okay.
Other comments? Seeing none, I'll put it to a vote. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is public hearing for 127 Hillside Avenue. Petition of James McElroy for special permit and coastal area management site plan review to construct a single-family residence with a swimming pool within 25 feet of high tide on map 49, block 795, parcel 88, of which Donna Naden is the owner. Is someone here to present for that?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations, by the way. Members of the board and staff members, my name is Jim McElroy. I'm an architect. I live and work here in Milford at 26 Hauser Street, here to represent Donna Naden for the proposed new single-family residence at 127 Hillside. Ms. Naden bought this property as a substantially damaged house from Sandy and decided to relocate her family from where she currently lives in Weston. She wants to make Milford her permanent home going forward by building this, her dream house. She plans to make that her primary residence. What I've done is designed a Nantucket-style colonial beach house with 4 bedrooms that also includes a guest suite for her elderly mother who stays from time to time. And it's located in an AE zone, but we've designed the house so that it's elevated to 19 feet above above sea level, which is 6 feet above the base flood elevation requirement of 13.0. The other thing I tried to do was to keep the house a little bit back from the street so as to create additional off-street parking. So I have 3 spaces, 1 in each of the driveways and 1 alongside, and then 3 under the house. So I know that in the summer, those streets get a little bit busy. And this house was designed to comply with FEMA requirements. We're using high wind glass and hurricane strapping, all that is required. If there's any questions, I would certainly be happy to answer them for you.
Mr. McElroy, if I could ask you just a minute just to move that a little bit so we can see. Thank you. Mr. Solkis, do you have comments?
I can read to you the recommendation from Stephen Harris, our zoning enforcement officer, who reviewed this. The proposal meets the requirements of Section 5.12 of the zoning regulations. Prior to any permit being issued, all outstanding comments from the Planning and Zoning Board, engineering, and any comments forthcoming from Public Works shall be satisfied.
Thank you. Is there questions from the board? Mr. Quish.
Actually, just a curiosity, why would you build 3 feet higher than the flood zone? You're at 19. Just curious.
Safety is the primary reason. She felt that she wanted to go as far above the flood zone as possible. I mean, with still staying within the 35-foot requirement.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yes, Mr. Grant.
Yeah, I have several items. One, kind of a simple thing. The drawings from the surveyor say that the elevation for the grade is 9.4. On the building plans, the architectural plans, the 35-foot height mark was actually measured from the first story slab, which is incorrect according to our zoning regulations. So you basically are a foot too high by my calculations. Second item is on the CAM report, Part 9 and Part 11A said that the structure was going to be constructed to VE standards, but on the architectural plans, there are showing the foundation or the first story to be done by the AE zone. So they don't coordinate. The rear deck. I had a question in regards to the rear deck does not meet, I guess this would also be for Mr. Salkis. The rear deck does not meet the setback requirements, and I could not find any variances that were granted for that particular deck. Also, on one of the survey drawings, it shows in the schedule of lot and building, it shows existing requirements like setback requirements, lot coverage, and so on like that. If it's a vacant lot, where did those come from and why are they on there? Also, the survey drawings are not signed and sealed as per our zoning regulations for the deck. There's no elevations on the architectural drawings on the plans, and there's nothing showing for the deck. Let's see. Also part, oh, no, I did that one, sorry. Okay, the proposed in-ground pool and the deck are within 25 feet of the mean high water mark, and I believe a special permit is required for that. I haven't seen anything for that. So, and there was a question on the stockpiles, the details. Again, the surveyor did not sign or seal the drawings for that because they are in flood zone. And that's, I think that covers
Mr. McElroy,
most of the items.
If we could maybe take those one at a time, would probably be best. Mr. Grant, if you want to take those one at a time, would probably be easiest. So.
Mr. Salkis, on the question on the deck and the setbacks?
I could tell you that a variance for a reduced side yard setback was recorded on April 23rd, 1984.
Was that, okay.
I don't know if that includes...
Was it for, when I read that, it was only for the structure? So is there a limit as to how much that was done? I couldn't find that information as to whether it was for the entire length or was only for part of the length of the original structure.
I couldn't tell you that. I don't know.
Can I comment, Mr. Grant? Where is I guess my question is, where is the deck not complying? Because the deck is allowed to encroach within the setback by 20%, so that's where the deck is compliant with the setbacks, according to the survey. Up to 4 feet. Decks and stairs can exceed the setback, into the setback by up to 20%. So that's what is actually there. And as far as the surveys go, not being signed and sealed, those were there were signed and sealed surveys delivered to the administrator, but then I was told to have the copies made that they didn't all have to be signed and sealed. That's
My
the
understanding
reason.
for the 20% is for stairs, but not a deck.
No, that's not the way the regulation reads, but
Mr. Grant, if we could, I know you had some other questions, maybe while Mr. Solkis is looking at, we could ask a few other questions. So if you could go back to your initial question, and maybe we could, Mr. McElroy could address that.
I can read the section. Section 4.1.4, projections into required yards. The space in any required yard shall be open and unobstructed except for the ordinary projection of open entries, steps, decks, stoops, or porches, cantilever roofs, eaves, cornices, chimneys, belt courses, window sills, balconies, decks, and similar architectural features as defined and generally used in architectural or building construction vernacular, provided that such feature shall not project more than 4 feet into any required yard, nor more than the distance equal to 20% of the required yard.
That answers the question on the deck for projection.
Mr. Grant, if you could go back to your initial questions that you had,
All
you
right.
had a list.
First question is, let's just do a simple one. CAM report, Part 9 and 11.A states that the structure was going to be constructed to the VE zone requirements of FEMA. The architectural plans show to the AE type zone, which is allowed, but there is a conflict between the CAM report and the drawings, which I think would need to be
I
cleared
can
up.
only think that that was an error when I filled out the report, because originally the house was designed to be in a VE zone, but we decided to bring it farther back from the water, and I guess that got overlooked, that change, when the report was already written. So when I made the changes for Mr. Podolsky, no one pointed out, so I must have missed it. The elevation of the house is to the VE requirement, as above, actually.
All right, the other question, the other thing I have is that basically the site drawings show that the grade elevation is at 9.4. The architectural drawings show that the 35-foot mark was measured from the first story slab, which is shown at 10, which puts the structure above the 35 feet as required by the regulations.
Without seeing the wall section, my guess is that I might have written the number incorrectly, but the house does meet the 35-foot mark from grade, the perimeter grade, and it will when it's constructed.
If you measured 35 feet from the slab on the first story,
No, I would measure from the perimeter grade.
well, it's not shown on the drawings that way. It's shown from the first floor slab, which is at elevation 10. So that puts you basically about a foot too high.
I don't have a copy of the drawing with me, but I mean, I could show you on the front elevation. I'm not sure where it may be an addition error, I'm not sure.
Excuse me, Mr. McElroy, if we could, and Mr. Grant, just so you can review this and take a look at it, correct? Okay. Mr. Grant, what other questions did you have?
Basically, at this particular point in time, I'd make a motion that we not approve the application as submitted until the coordination between the CAM reports and the drawings are correctly coordinated.
Okay, I think, do we have to go, we still have to go through the process of the public hearing part of this, if there's any public comment? Would that be correct? Okay, so first, is there any other questions from the board? Yes, Mr. Lutz.
Yes. Mr. Sulkus, I'm looking at a document that was in our packet, the CAM SPR zoning review, dated 11/22, when Mr. Harris, on his zoning review, listed a whole bunch of things. Is that different than the report that you were looking at?
Yeah, the one I was looking at is dated 12/30/16. The one I think you're referring to is 11/22/16.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he changed his
Yeah, and it looks like in between that time is also when the review was conducted by the city engineer. So the city engineer, and that report should have been part of your packet. The city engineer had 13 comments. And some of them are along the lines of what you're discussing this evening regarding the CAM, regarding the elevation. Do you have that report in front of you?
No. Well, maybe I can just ask it to you this way. The first thing on the 11/22 report says, the proposed in-ground pool and structurally independent rear deck within 25 means of the high water mark require a special permit.
Which is why we're here this evening.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. The second one says, the construction plans and specifications for the independent rear deck have not been submitted.
What I can tell you is that after that report was written, there is a comment about that in engineer Greg Puglisi's report, comment number 10. Proposed elevations have not been indicated for the proposed residence or for the freestanding deck. Elevations will be necessary to confirm compliance with the NFIP and Section 5.8 of the Milford Zoning Regulations. An approval, if granted, should be conditioned based upon all structures to be elevated to the minimum standards of the NFIP and Section 5.8 of the Milford Zoning Regulations. Actual proposed elevation should be provided at time of application for building permit.
Okay, so in other words, we can't, the application is incomplete right now because we don't have the construction plans for the rear deck. Am I correct?
Can I make a comment? This was not brought to my attention by Mr. Bielski. I met with him and he told me that everything was fine for the application and he was going to indicate so.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out where we are. Yeah.
I don't know, this is what he told me. When I went back the second time and made all the corrections he asked for, he said we were fine.
Was that done after the 28th of December?
I believe it was. I'm not really sure, David, because I was in there a number of times with him and I went over every detail with him. And he told me that everything all of his concerns were addressed.
Okay, we don't have that. Do you have a written confirmation? No? Okay.
I might have had an email from him, but.
Mr. Sulkus, I guess, do we have a complete application or do we not have a complete application?
I'm not 100% sure because I didn't review this. This was reviewed by Mr. Harris. All I can go by are the reports that we have in here. So we have two things in here. We have, on the one hand, Mr. Harris saying that it meets the requirements of 5.12, which is a particular section of our book. But then we have the same day a report issued by Mr. Puglowski, who's got, again, 13 items that, at that time needed to be addressed. So I don't know if they have been addressed or not.
Okay, what would be the best procedure now? Mr. Harris is here, okay. Yeah, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you there. Yes, Mr. Griffin.
Joe Griffith, the Director of Permitting and Land Use. I'm also the building official here for Milford. And I guess what I'd like to clarify, without getting into the application itself, is the discussions and the procedures that our office has adopted in terms of receiving the CAM report and then also the special permit under, I believe it's Article 4 of our zoning regulations. What I've been trying to make sure that our zoning enforcement officer, Stephen Harris, as well as David and anybody else who's reviewing the drawings, are distinguishing between looking for the zoning regulation requirements, i.e., is the deck that's in the V zone, is that declared as being structurally independent? Excuse me. Is it above the required elevation for the V zone? But not get into discussions or analysis or review of the code compliance for that deck. So when we get into discussions about what is the structural, what are the structural implications, what is the necessary engineering associated with the foundations, with the piers, with the deck itself, we leave that for the building permit application. So I've specifically requested that our zoning enforcement officer, as part of the application for either the special permit or the CAM review, not get into discussions or review of the structure itself. So I think that's what you were referring to, Mr. Lutz, as far as the deck drawings. And it really wouldn't be consistent with what our policy is in terms of requiring those drawings.
Okay, thank you. Is there other comments, questions from the board? Oh, yes, Mr. Quish.
I still think it's somewhat unclear as to whether or not the questions put back to the applicant have been adequately answered, and we have some confusion about whether or not it is a complete application. Is there something that we could kick the can down the road till next meeting and make sure that all the ducks are in a row? I mean, generally, I don't see a problem with someone building a house on an existing lot that they own, and we want to support the development and redevelopment of the beachfront after the storm. So I don't think there's anything negative about the project itself, but just some things that aren't really clear.
Okay, would it be the board's thoughts that we leave the hearing open and get these questions answered and it comes back to us at the next meeting? Would that satisfy everyone for this? Do we need to vote on that, or do we do? Okay. Dave, do we need to vote on that?
You don't necessarily need to vote on it, but I guess the question is, if your questions are building code related and outside of the general scope of review for a pool that's within 25 feet of the mean high water mark, whether or not it's really germane, versus when the applicant comes in to get his actual building permit, he has to be code compliant at that point in time. Even if he is showing you a plan this evening that may have the height incorrectly stated, when it comes time to get the actual permit, it's going to be reviewed, and at that time, it's got to be compliant. So I don't know that the applicant is really, if it's incomplete, I don't know that he's trying to get away with anything. I think it's really just, whatever technical issues may be there, they'll be caught at the permitting point. And again, the purpose of coming before you this evening is, again, for the swimming pool, which we've actually had no questions on.
I just want to clarify, I'm not questioning that you're trying to get away with anything. It seemed like there was some questions on the board that's unclear. Yes, Mr. Quish.
So the question was asked of Mr. Solskis, is this a complete application? And he said, I'm not sure. So if he's not sure, then we should be sure and then proceed. If he's saying after reflection, the only questions are building related construction related that will be addressed at permit and CO stage, then I'm fine with it. But if he says, I'm not sure if we have a complete application, then I have a question.
Let me clarify by saying that when Mr. Harris reviewed this, he thought it was the information that was needed to measure whether or not this complies with Section 5.12, which is why this is here. It complies with that. So he wrote that it complies with that.
Okay, well, I'll leave it up to the board, Mr. Quish.
Yeah, so I would at that point say that, open and close the public hearing, and then we can vote. As long as we're getting direction from staff that it is complete from their office perspective.
Okay, are there other comments or questions from the board first? Mr. Grant.
It's just that, we have the zoning regulations. There are several items that don't meet those regulations at this point. I mean, as far as the project goes, I have no problems with the project. It's just that basically it's what has been presented to the board. There are sections of our regulations that are not met. So the question would be is if the board feels that these things would be taken care of when the actual applications are submitted into the zoning office, then you can go that route, or we can say, all right, make these corrections, present the proper information and coordination to the board, and then go from there. So we got two choices.
All right, thank you, Mr. Grant. Any other questions from the board? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to open it to public comment. And first, anyone who is in favor of the project, if you could come forward, approach the podium, state your name, and keep your comments limited to 3 minutes, and address to the board only, please. Anyone in favor? Seeing none, is there anyone opposed to this project? Again, if you would approach the podium, state your name and address, and address your comments to the board, and keep them to about 3 minutes. Okay, seeing none, I'd like to close public hearing. I would ask if there's a motion from the board on this. Yes, Mr. Quish.
I would move to approve based on approvals or compliance with all zoning regulations to be addressed at permit stage. And again, obviously, the construction aspect will be handled by the building department.
Okay, is there a second? Mr. Sutton, second. Is there comments on the motion? Okay, there's a motion on the floor, and I would ask all in favor of that motion, which is to approve the project with the stipulation that obviously all building zoning regulations are followed. Is that the motion, Mr. Quish?
Mr. Chair, do you also want to add interdepartmental reports?
Yes.
Just so we can be sure that the city engineer is satisfied with what he reviewed.
Mr. Quish, is that acceptable?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So there's a motion on the floor that's been seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, the motion passes. Thank you. Mr. Solkis, is there any comment from Well, actually, that would come under staff, so, okay, liaison reports. Is there any liaison reports from?
I have.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Salkis has sent out last week, or the beginning of this week, a memo to everybody in regards to, on the 30th, which is a Monday, up at Hartford, there is a program being put on by the state for anybody on planning and zoning boards. It runs in the morning. I don't know if anybody has signed up. I have. But if anybody else is interested, I think it's going to be a very good seminar on planning and zoning regulations. They're going to have some attorneys there to answer questions. They're going to have some people that are very knowledgeable in zoning regulations also are going to speak. And so I think it'd be a very good education if anybody's really interested. And if anybody else signs up, let me know, because we could do some carpooling to drive up.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. I think it would be worthwhile for anyone who does have the time to attend. Anything we can do to better our knowledge is definitely worth it. Okay, next is Regulations Subcommittee. I know, Mr. Grant, there's a couple items on the agenda.
Yeah, you have before you two regulation proposed changes. First one is the zoning regulation change, the text change. At the request of some of the merchants downtown, they've asked for what's called a blade sign, which is a type of sign that basically extends out from the building. So to accommodate their requests, it is actually a new regulation for us, a new definition, which would go under 5.3.5.9 would be for blade signs, which would give a definition and some requirements as to how big they are and how far out they can stick. To not have any conflicts within our existing regulations, there's a word change to 5.3.7.1 with some additional wording to that section, which would offset any conflicts within the regulations for everything. So that's the first one that's in front of you. The second one is more of a housekeeping item. It's on authority. It's basically at this particular point in time, if somebody from the general public wants to make a change or has a suggestion to the zoning regulations, there is basically no avenue, no procedures within our regulations or within the planning and zoning office to allow that. So by making some adjustments in the wording to authority to allow that, that's what this is. This is for Article 10, Section 10.1, which is definitions. So that would allow basically if anybody from any citizen can come in and request a change to our zoning regulations. So those are the two items that we have before you. But I'm asking, I'd like to make a motion that the board approve them to be sent out to the different agencies for their reviews and their comments.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. Before we do that, is there any comments or questions for Mr. Grant on either of these? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to see if someone would have a motion to approve these to be sent on. Mr. Quish.
I think John made the motion, I'll second.
Okay. All right, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Grant, and the Regulations Subcommittee for the work you guys do. Thank you. All right, next is the approval of the minutes for the 12/20, 16 and 1/3/17 meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? So move. Second? Mr. Moore? All in favor? Opposed? Okay. Motion carries. Chair's report. I have no report right now, but just everyone hopefully will put up with me for a little while here until we get used to things. Staff report, Mr. Quish, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to, again, thank Tony for his service and welcome you as chair, and thank you for stepping up to the plate.
Staff report, Mr. Sulkus.
None this evening.
Okay. Well, that about does it. Is there a motion for adjournment?
I move to adjourn.
Second? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Thank you very much.